Hello and welcome to our first tutorial for BIFE students who are studying 3D game design. We're just going to look at Blender and the basic interface, how to get it and how to install it on your PC. So I'm just going to go to my browser here. The address I'm at is blender.org. This is the kind of central hub of the Blender universe. There's a whole bunch of information here. This is their new website on what Blender can do, and all sorts of fascinating and wonderful things that hopefully you can do at the end of the year. To download Blender, click on the download button. Brings you to this page here. You can download 3 flavors of Blender, or 4 actually. There's Blender for Windows, for Mac, and for Linux. Now, most of you are probably Windows users. If you are, you need to know whether your operating system on your PC is 64-bit or 32-bit. So to do that, go down to your startup bar, go to Settings, in System, go to About, and then you're going to, you'll see Windows 10. You scroll down, so Windows 10 Pro, blah blah blah, and then I've got a 64-bit operating system. If you've got a 32-bit operating system, it'll say so here, and then you'll know what to download. To download it, just click on one of these links here, and you can download a zip file if you want to unzip it. It'll be a bit smaller if you have a very slow connection, but this is probably the easiest. The current release is 2.77a. That's what I would download. This is 2.78. This is the next version of Blender, and while you will find features in this that are interesting and more powerful than in 2.77a, it is not a stable release. There's lots of problems with using release candidates. Sometimes they're not backwards compatible. Sometimes they have catastrophic errors in them that they need to release subsequent releases. So for example, this was released as 2.77. There was something wrong with 2.77, so they had to release an add-on, 2.77a. So by all means download this for exploring, but if you're going to do a project, use the stable release. After you've downloaded your file, double click on it and install it, and it'll open Blender, which is, do not show this again, there we go. This is Blender here. If you click anywhere on the interface, or anywhere on the screen now, this splash screen will disappear, but before it does, again, it'll show you the release version and the build. All of the last files that you've opened will be listed here. If you've never used Blender before, this will be blank. You can try and emulate other pieces of software. So 3D Studio Max and Maya are very expensive, but very commonly used in the industry. For now, I'll leave it on Blender. We'll just click on the screen. So this is Blender. It is a complex piece of software. It does a huge number of things. You can make cartoons in this, like Toy Story. You can composite 3D animation and 2D film and make something like Guardians of the Galaxy, where you've got animated characters and real live actors interacting. You can make computer games, which is what you guys are hopefully going to do. So it's a very complicated piece of software, and if it looks complicated, that's okay, because it is. But hopefully by the end of the year you'll have a deep understanding of it. So let's just have a quick examination of this interface here. The first thing to notice is in this main window is our 3D viewport. So this is our world, or our game, or our animation, whatever we're going to make. Everything appears here in the window in front of us. This object here, this selection of lines, is a camera. Doesn't look like a camera, but that's a camera. This circle here with the line, that's a light, or in Blender they're called lamps. And this is a cube. The cube is the object that's active. It's got an orange highlight around it. To select objects in Blender, you right click with your mouse. So if I right click on the lamp, that's now selected. If I right click on the camera, now you may notice something changing up here, okay, as I select the different objects. Okay, in Blender the interface is very malleable, so you can change it and customize it. So I'm just going to place the mouse here, in between these two parts of the display. And I'm going to just drag this across and then drag this down. Just makes it a little bit bigger so you can see what I'm doing. So as well as right clicking here and selecting objects, I can also select them here. This panel here is called the outliner. I want you to imagine you're playing Skyrim or some visually complex game, and it's got thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of objects. They're all listed here. So every object in this game or in this scene is listed in this window. So this is if it's not listed here, it's not in the game. So we can select by left clicking on these objects, and then in this window right clicking on them. So how do we move around in our 3D space? Well, there's a few ways. To zoom in and out, we simply roll the middle mouse wheel. So on your mouse you've got a left mouse button, right mouse button, and you've got a wheel in the middle. So if you run forward and run back, you'll zoom in and zoom out. If you want to spin around, so move around in the space, if you hold that middle mouse button, so that scroll wheel, just press it down and then move your mouse, you will be able to navigate through 3D space. Now for now it doesn't matter if you spin it quickly and get lost or just move around. And we can zoom in and zoom out as we, before we or after we move through 3D space. You can see there's kind of a problem here because I've selected the lamp, but I'm zooming in and zooming out on the cube. That's not terribly helpful. So when you've selected an object, if you want to put that in the center of the view, so I'll select my lamp here. If you look at your keyboard, and if you're using a laptop, it might be slightly different, but a full-size keyboard, on the right-hand side of the keyboard is a numpad. So selection of numbers, you've got a plus and minus, an enter key, a star, backslash, and numblock. So if you press full stop, it'll center on the object that's selected. So I'm going to select my cube and press full stop. Now that's in the middle. Now I can select over here if I want, select my camera, full stop. Now I've snapped over there. And now when I rotate around that object. Cube, full stop. Now I'm rotating around the cube. I can zoom out. So that's a very important part of the Blender interface. Otherwise, you're trying to zoom in and zoom out on an object that, if I'm working on the lamp, I can't see it now. So it's a very important part of navigation. So select the object, press full stop, it centers, and then we can zoom in and zoom out. The numpad is used all the time in Blender, and actually when you start making games you'll find that it's a two-handed process. Your right hand, if you're right-handed, will be on the mouse, and your alternate hand, so for me my left hand, is on the keyboard. So if I press 7 on the numpad, I look from above, press 1 I look from the front, 3 I look from the right. You can see up here it's telling me, so top, front, right. If I press the 5 key in the middle, I'll change from orthographic to perspective. Now let me just try and explain a little bit about that to you. We'll look at orthographic and perspective a little in more depth another day. I was going to change this to wireframe view. It'll make it easier to see. How I do that is I can select this here, this shading button, and go wireframe. So this is my cube. You can see my cube is selected, but it doesn't look like a cube, it looks like a square, because I cannot see the lines that go backwards from each of the corners because I'm in orthographic mode. If I press 5 on the numpad, I go to perspective mode, and now I can see that it has depth. So that's what, or that's the difference between perspective and orthographic. So one is looking directly from the side or from the front or from the top, and one and shows no depth, and the other you can look from the same angle but you see depth. It has a vanishing point. Like I said, we'll explore that another day in a bit more depth. So this is the basic sort of Blender interface. You should play around and just get used to moving from object to object before we start editing objects and making things, so that you are proficient in kind of getting to objects. The last thing I'm going to show you is how to add something new, add in a new object. Before I do that, I just want to explain to you what this little circle in the middle is. So this is our cursor. If I left click somewhere, this white and red circle will appear where I left click. Okay. Now if I want to add an object, it'll be added where this is. So I can go add, and you can see I can add an awful lot. But for now, what we're going to look at is just meshes. So add mesh. Monkey is one of them. Blender has a long history with monkeys. That's another conversation. So let's just put in another cube. So now I have 2 cubes, and by default Blender has added .001. If I added in another cube, it would be .002. And I'll show you another date how to rename all these things so you can keep track of all of the assets in your game. So I can right click on this cube and center on it. I can right click on this cube and center on that. And so if I want to add in objects into the world, I place my cursor, I go add mesh, let's put a cone in. There's a cone, move my cursor, add mesh, torus, add mesh, monkey, and it is a monkey. Okay, so that's it for now. Practice doing that, moving around the 3D space, and try and be proficient at selecting objects, centering on them, rotating and zooming.